It was an action-packed weekend. Both Quinnipiac men's and women's ice hockey teams got it going this weekend. We have it all coming up on the Neutral Zone. Hello, Quinnipiac hockey fans, and welcome to the Neutral Zone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Neutral Zone. I'm Andrew Badillo, and I'm joined alongside by Quinnipiac women's ice hockey beat reporter Matt McAuliffe. Matt, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent, Matt. And the women's ice hockey team played extremely well this weekend. Weekend sweep of Dartmouth and Harvard, beating Dartmouth 6-3 and Harvard 4-2. What did you see from the teams this weekend?
So it was definitely a dominant weekend for women's ice hockey team, and I'm going to use the phrase, it was definitely a confidence boost for this team as well. Dartmouth and Harvard, again, they're not very strong teams in this conference. I mean, Harvard 1-4 in conference play, and then Dartmouth with 1 win overall. But it was still a confidence boost because Sydney Rossman, she had a tough weekend. And she faced only 16 shots against Dartmouth, but she saved 15 of them. So that was good for her to get that confidence boost. And then against Harvard, she faced only 12 shots and only let 1 by. But again, it was the confidence boost for Sydney Rossman and this Quinnipiac offense. And that's why this weekend was so big. And in the ECAC conference, a weekend sweep is always huge.
And Rossman is a hugely important player for this team. Cass Turner prides herself and her team on defense. That's what they preach. That's what they use to fuel the offense with talented players such as Melissa Samoskevich and TT Cianfrano. Going forward, do you think that this weekend will prove to be the sort of springboard for further success for Rossman?
I think so because, again, like I said, she only let up 2 goals the entire weekend, which is a big deal in the ECAC. Again, not too many shots, not that strong of opponents, but still, anytime you can get a weekend sweep in a conference that is this tight is always huge. Rossman is definitely the rock of this team. Cass Turner said she trusts Rossman, and she always will. She is the goalie, she is the rock, and she's staying in that.
And in terms of the forwards, was there anyone in particular who stood out?
Yes, definitely TT Cianfrano. She's inching closer and closer to that 100-point mark, and I think she might hit it this weekend. There's my prediction. My bold prediction for the weekend is that TT definitely hits 100 points. But yes, TT was definitely the one who stepped up offensively, and I'm still looking for Emma Woods offensively. I'm still looking for that captain to step up too.
Okay, moving along now to the women's ice hockey USCHO polls. Let's take a look. Here we got Wisconsin coming in at number 1, Minnesota following at number 2, Minnesota Duluth at 3, St. Lawrence, the ECAC team in the top 5 at 11-1 coming in at number 4, followed by Colgate, Boston College, Clarkson, Quinnipiac at number 8, UND North Dakota at 9, and Northeastern at 10. Matt, let's get a little reaction from the polls really quick. Quinnipiac coming in at number 8.
Yeah, I think having the USCHO keep them at number 8 was definitely a good call. I mean, like I said, they definitely had a weekend sweep, but it was against somewhat weak opponents. So I think staying at 8 was definitely a good call. And if they get a weekend sweep this weekend coming up, they might climb. I think they'll climb to at least 6.
So let's talk about that weekend series coming up. Cornell and Colgate. They got Cornell on Friday and Colgate on Saturday. It's always an interesting trip when Quinnipiac heads up to upstate New York. Colgate is a phenomenal team this year. Cornell historically has been a very good team as well. So let's hear your thoughts on the weekend.
It's definitely a big weekend. These 2 teams are top 5 in the ECAC, and if Quinnipiac wants to find themselves climbing in the ECAC standings, they need to have a weekend sweep, and they need to perform well against these teams. Cornell 3-2 in conference play right now, and they're 6th in the conference in goals. So I think that might be the weak point that Quinnipiac can take advantage of. And they have a 1-2 away record, which I think, again, will cost them. And I think Quinnipiac wins this game 3-2.
Okay, so let's also talk about the Nutmeg Classic, which is a little bit further on down the road. We're not going to have a show next week because of Thanksgiving break, but let's a little preview of the Nutmeg Classic.
Sure. I think they will take care of business in the Nutmeg Classic. They've won it the past 4 years, and I think that they'll take care of business this year, most definitely.
All right, now we're going to toss it on over to Phil Acree, who's standing by with some women's ice hockey notes on the freshman players. Phil.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excuse me. Well, anyways,
This freshman class has been a pretty impressive bunch, but I think the first freshman that you have to look at who's gotten the most minutes on the ice is Katie Tabin. The Winnipeg native has started in 13 of the team's 14 games, and in the last 4 games, she's had 2 goals and 2 points. I think it's more not a result of not getting comfortable in the offense, but it's just a matter of getting more offensive opportunities. She's getting a lot of more looks with the puck, and really, she's going to be a starter for a long time. You know, head coach Cass Turner has voiced her confidence in the defenseman in most press conferences, saying she's really been a rock in the defense, so it's good to see a freshman like that carving such a huge role for her early on in her career. But then you have to look at Kenzie Prater. She's a forward. She's found herself typically on the second line, and she's had exceptional hockey IQ. You know, you can tell that she's always looking for where the puck is going to go and what she's going to do if the puck comes to her. And she has 2 goals and 6 points so far this season, so that's pretty good numbers considering the amount of minutes she's had. In the last 4 games, she's had 11 shots on goals, so you have to assume that an offensive outbreak is probably going to happen sooner or later for her. But then, as many people have noted, the other freshman who has gotten a lot of minutes is now Sarah-Eve Coutu-Gabou. The Quebec native and the French-speaking forward didn't play in the team's first 10 games, but against Clarkson, she found herself immediately inserted in the lineup at the second line ahead of Kenzie Lancaster. A bold move from Cass Turner, considering Lancaster had scored her first 2 collegiate goals the weekend before against Yale and Brown. But obviously Cass has a lot of confidence in her because she's been a hyped-up prospect as well, and she looks fantastic on the ice. She hasn't scored yet, but again, probably going to happen sooner or later considering how many shots she's had in the 4 games she's played so far. But then for disappointments-wise, I would say Allison Rothke has been one of the biggest ones. You know, she had offers from University of Minnesota, Duluth, Clarkson, and obviously Quinnipiac, and she chose Quinnipiac coming here as a hyped-up defensive prospect, but she really has not lived up to these expectations. She's only played in 6 games so far, and maybe she's just not ready for the rigor of college hockey, which is kind of a surprise considering how hyped she was coming into this program. She needs to put it all together for this team, but also there's Abby Cleary. She's a forward for the Bobcats, and she played a lot of minutes early on. She's played in 12 of the team's 14 games, but her minutes have steadily decreased as the season has went on. She has 0 goals and 0 points so far this season, and that's surprising considering she came from powerhouse Shattuck St. Mary's all the way in Minnesota. But it's just surprising to see her offensive production has just not been there. And then the last freshman has been goaltender Abby Ives. She hasn't got a lot of playing time, especially when you consider Sydney Rossman's ahead of her. But in a short time, she has gotten time in games against Brown and Clarkson, excuse me. She has looked good. She's recorded 7 saves in about 35 minutes. So she's looked pretty good. We don't know if she's a goaltender in the future, but in limited time, she's looked good. But that's it for me on the freshman part. I'm going to send it over to Gabby Riggy and Matt McAuliffe, who have the touchscreen ready to go.
All right, Phil, thanks. Actually, you're going to send it over to me, but it's okay. A lot of good stuff there. Women's ice hockey freshman making a big impact early on. You all could follow Phil on Twitter at Phil Acree. It's just his name straight on through. Now we're going to send it on over to Matt McAuliffe and Gabby Riggy, who are standing by with their ECAC Power Rankings. Guys.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We're going to start off at number 5. Matt, I'll let you go on first since
Sure.
you were just on the desk.
So my number 5 is going to be Cornell. As I said earlier, they're 6th in the conference with goals, with only 12 so far in conference play. So that's why I have them at my number 5.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with you. I think for me, I'm at this juncture where we're at the point where the season's about to go off for break. I think Cornell's going to be one of the teams you're going to have to watch down the stretch. Their in-conference record at 5-2-0 isn't that terrible. I think their biggest strength is their goaltending, and that's going to be something that's most key, especially in the ECAC. They're a very defense-first and goaltending-first conference, so I think that's going to be key going forward.
My number 4 is the Quinnipiac Bobcats. They have a conference record of 4-2 right now, and they've struggled against the powerhouses like Clarkson and like St. Lawrence. So that's why I have them at number 4. And the goaltending was a little shaky for that weekend 2 weeks ago. So that's why I have them at number 4, but I hope that they can climb the ranks.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you that the Bobcats are at number 4 as they are in the regular rankings. My biggest thing is depth of scoring. It's those things you touch on. It's the types of players and contributions that Phil just discussed. But I think for me, last year, what made them so deadly was the depth of scoring. That's something that they're kind of lacking at this point in the year. If they can get that going, they have a strong enough defensive core and they're a defensive-oriented team that they should be fine down the stretch.
So my number 3 is Colgate. I have them at number 3. For one reason only. Jessie Eldridge, she leads the conference in points. She has 22 points. Her offense has been dominant, but this team only has 102 saves in conference play, so that's why they're not at my number 2 or number 1.
Now, I'm going to change it a little bit up here. I'm actually going to go with Clarkson. They were a team that surprised a lot of people in the Frozen Four in February. They held Boston College held on really well. They surprised for an ECAC team. To me, I'm not totally sure of where they stand now that they had big losses in Shannon McCauley and other people like that. So I think while they have Shea Tiley in net, I'm not sure. They have really talented underclassmen coming in, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to push them forward going forward. So they're on the brink of either being very good or struggling down the stretch.
So my number 2 now, I have the St. Lawrence Saints at number 2. The reason why I have them at number 2 is the top forwards that they have with Kennedy Marchment and Brooke Webster. They are second and third in the conference in points. Marchant has 20, Webster is 17. Their offense looks dominant. That's why I have them at number 2.
All right, well, I'm going to go for Colgate at number 2. So I see we do disagree a little bit here. Some of the same reasons Colgate's played well against Merrimack, who's leading the CHA, Northeastern, who's done really well in Hockey East, which has surprised a lot of people. As you've talked about, it's the contributions from people like Eldridge. My biggest thing, though, is their only offensive contributions have come from the defensive end. I think if they get depth of scoring from the forwards, that's what's going to help them going forward.
So my number 1 is the Clarkson Golden Knights. I have them at number 1. They're on an 8-game win streak. They're 6-0 in conference play. Shea Tiley is dominant in between the pipes. Right now, there's no stopping this Clarkson team.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think for the top 3, as it is usually with the ECAC, there's the cluster of teams at the top. It's kind of muddled in the middle. Any way that it could go, any weekend can really determine it. And then there's the teams who really struggled. But I'm going to still go with St. Lawrence as the number 1 again. Undefeated. The reason why I put them ahead of Clarkson and Colgate, they defeated Clarkson and tied them, and that's definitely a big thing. Clarkson, again, returning a lot of those same people. And the fact that Kennedy Marchment is leading the country in scoring with the title that's been held by people like Amanda Kessel, like Alex Carpenter, to say that
Big
Kennedy
names.
Marchment is leading it,
Big names.
that would have surprised the hell out of me if you said that last year. So for me, that's why the Saints are at the top. I think the conference is really volatile down the stretch, and that you can see a lot of turnover from weekend to weekend.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to send it over to Kirby Paulson to tell you more about what's going on around the country.
Actually, it's going to be me again. Kirby, hang on one second. Thanks a lot, guys, for those rankings. See Clarkson at number 1 for both of you guys. Now we're going to toss it over to Kirby Paulson with a little segment called Kirby's Countdown. Kirby, 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
Hello, let's jump right into it. What on earth is the national tournament going to look like come next postseason? Yeah. I know it's November and everything, but man, are there some strong teams already making their names known across the board. Of course, you have Minnesota and Wisconsin that are barring any major catastrophes, should almost surely make it in. Then you come back east and look at the ECAC. There are at least 5 or 6 real decent teams that are going to make postseason play interesting. Not to mention teams like Colgate and St. Lawrence have yet to lose a contest this season. Will we see another undefeated team skate their way into the national championship like BC did last season? Maybe not, but the competition throughout the country is going to make things a real blast come stretch time. For whatever reason, it seems as though the fact that Holy Cross women's hockey will be jumping up to a D1 schedule has snuck onto everyone's radar. Well, fun fact, Holy Cross women's hockey will be jumping up to a D1 schedule. USCHO writer Candace Horgan wrote a great piece about the move that I urge everyone to check out. By next season, the Crusaders will be playing at that D1 schedule, but my biggest question, however, is how will this have an effect on conferences? Could their jump pave the way for a move into Hockey East? One could make that argument, as our good friend Gabby Riggy has, that a move to the CHA would strengthen that conference. Andrew, back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Kirby. Went a little bit over the ticker, but you'll have another opportunity coming up after break because I'm going to toss it back to you for your men's ice hockey countdown. You guys can also follow Gabby Riggy on Twitter at G_Riggy and Matt McAuliffe on Twitter at MJM5798. When we come back, Kirby will be back, and we'll go over some men's ice hockey stuff around the country.
Coming up on Bobcat Breakdown.
And welcome into Studio 125.
So what? If you score 40 points in a basketball game, we all know you play Quinnipiac Intramurals. We all know you love to shoot the rock.
Well, if you think that's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, what I'm about to say, I guess, is going to be pretty ridiculous in your book. But I'm going to say yes, there is a controversy. I'm
line, getting ready to punch the ball as it lands right in front of another Monument player.
It's 9:30 Eastern, and you know what that means. Sports Pause is on the air.
Ball played up the middle. Iman Whalen with a little cheat.
off the puck. Preseason just boils down to going after another national championship and not necessarily focusing on the one before.
MJ, it is time for our favorite part of the show. It's the top 5 plays of the week, brought to you by B&D Deli, home of the Q-Dog.
Let's talk about the first play you want to break down.
Yeah, let's break it down right away.
But the one name I'm going to throw out there is a freshman, Mika Maples.
Welcome back to the neutral zone. We're going to toss it back over to Kirby Paulson, who is standing by with his countdown. Kirby.
All right, let's see if we can get it down now. First things first, the University of North Dakota is winless in its last 6 contests with 4 losses and 2 ties. Who knows why they're having a couple of troubles there. They might be having a bit of a adjustment issue without that CBS line, but don't count them out just yet. Let's head on over to Hockey East action from the weekend. Over the weekend, a game between Northeastern and Notre Dame was suspended after the second period after a Zamboni malfunction caused the ice not to melt. I talked to Josh Cummins, who works for SB Nation College Hockey, who told me that the ice just never really froze over that area. That game is going to be decided upon for the remaining third period later in this week. Beyond that, we're going to take a look at the rest of the conference. We're going to talk about the fact that, hey, Duluth and Denver are playing really well out in that NCHC. You never really know how that's going to play out. Again, very talented conference with a whole lot of talented teams out there. I'm going to toss back to Andrew. There you go. We're under the clock this time.
Thanks a lot, Kirby. Excellent job. News and notes from around college hockey. I'm going to bring in my friend and my men's ice hockey, or in Q30 Sports men's ice hockey beat reporter Kyle Levaster. Kyle, how you doing?
Great, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Let's go over the men's ice hockey weekend. 2 big wins over Dartmouth and Harvard. Pretty big wins, Kyle.
Yeah, I thought it was just what this men's hockey team needed, and I think the polls showed just how big that Harvard win was. We'll get to those later. But I think it was really just a big confidence booster. We'll also see what MJ Baird and Victoria Ritigliano had to say in the rebound after the Harvard game. But I saw a lot of players stand out, especially Landon Smith. And if we could take a look at Landon Smith's player card to see how he's been doing this year. Andrew, look at that first line. It says he was the only player returning from the first line last year. He was with players such as Sam Annis and Travis St. Dennis. We both covered the team last year. Was Landon Smith a superstar? I don't think so. I think he was more
just under, like literally under that line.
Yeah, I think he was a second-tier player that kind of just supported the rest of that first line. But if you look at back to when he was playing in juniors, Landon Smith was the MVP of the British Columbia Hockey League. Andrew, he had 43 goals in 58 games and 80 points in total. And I think his hat trick against Dartmouth really showed that he has the ability to be the MVP of this team, if not the MVP, maybe right with Tim Clifton as the best forward on this team. He just needs to be more consistent. And this 3-goal game, before that, the only goal that he had was back in when they played Northeastern. So there was
weekend.
Exactly. There were 7 games in between when he scored his first goal, and then the 3 others from Dartmouth. So if we see more consistency out of Landon Smith, I think he's really going to elevate this team, and that's what we saw from him at Dartmouth.
Okay, now we're going to take a look at the men's ice hockey rebound from this past weekend. MJ Baird and Victoria Ritigliano broke it all down.
2 games, 4 points. The Quinnipiac men's ice hockey team swept the weekend here at High Point Solutions Arena, beating the Dartmouth Big Green by a final score of 6-3 yesterday, and tonight hosted the Harvard Crimson and beat them by a final score of 4-2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Rebound, presented by Q30 Television and Q30 Sports. I'm MJ Baird, joined alongside today Victoria Ritigliano, a men's ice hockey beat reporter. Victoria, thanks for coming on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, MJ.
Victoria, so let's start our rebound today, talking a little bit about today's game, but the weekend as a whole. Start with special teams. Quinnipiac, 5 power play goals over the course of 2 games this weekend. They had struggled earlier in the season with the power play. How do you think that's improving as we saw this weekend?
I think it's improving because they're finding players that are meshing well. And Rand Pecknold said in the press conference, they're finding where these players need to be on the ice in order to find these holes, in order to get these shots on net. You're seeing from this team 3 defensemen on the power play first unit, which is not normal. Usually you might see 3 forwards, 4 forwards to try to get that offensive movement going along, but Pecknold has 3, and he said the reason for this is he wants to have his best players out on the ice. And you saw in these games, he did. They had 5 power play goals, 3 last night against Dartmouth, 2 tonight against Harvard, and these power play goals have been huge for this team. without them, obviously the scores would have been completely different. And in a season where there's a lot more penalties being called, you really need to have a strong power play unit, and they're starting out to have that.
Victoria, as Rand Pecknold has harped on all season, losing a lot of players last year on the power play. Sam Annis, Devon Taves, only some of the names that Quinnipiac has lost. But let's move on now to another name the Bobcats lost, Michael Gartig, the person filling that void, Chris Truel. How would you rate his performance this weekend?
I think he had a relatively good weekend. I mean, he did come away with 2 wins. I thought he played pretty well on the penalty kill. The Bobcats killed a lot of penalties over the past 2 nights and were 100% on the PK. And Pecknold said in the press conference the most important player on the ice during the penalty kill is the goaltender. However, I think the reason why Harvard had so many shots on goal tonight compared to Quinnipiac was because he was giving up a lot of rebounds. He looked a little shaky in net, a lot of opportunities there. I think 2 of the goals last night from Dartmouth came off the rebound, and one of the goals tonight did. So he really needs to get a little bit more confident in holding the puck in, not letting it back out, because moving along further down the season, that could come up as troublesome.
All right, Kyle, so we heard it in the rebound. Power play and goalie situation. Let's talk about the power play first. Quinnipiac, much better on the power play this weekend.
Absolutely. It was their best weekend on the power play. And something I thought was interesting that Victoria said, that in a year where there are so many penalties, special teams is huge. Look at the screen right now, 14 power plays. They were successful on 5, and they had an onslaught of shots with 27. This is a team where throughout the last 5 years, they have been the #1 power play in the country. So when they're successful on the power play, everything is rolling, and their offense is able to generate opportunities. And something interesting that I thought was with the loss of Annis, St. Denis, and Taves, last night on USCHO Live, Rand Pecknold said if Sam Annis was still with the team, they might even be 11-0 just because of how excellent he was on the power play. I believe he said that he was a power play machine, where he was tied for the lead in the ECAC with power play goals from last year. Obviously, they don't have him this year, so they've had to find other ways to adjust. And this past weekend, we actually saw 3 defensemen on the power play, like Victoria said. They're just trying to put the best players out on the ice to get those opportunities. I think this weekend gives them confidence. And then through the rest of the stretch, I mentioned Landon Smith earlier. He's going to be key if they want to win. But they're also going to have Tim Clifton. He is tied for 2nd in the nation in career power play goals. So, yeah, I mean, the power play, if that is running, expect great things down the stretch for Quinnipiac.
Okay, so very quickly, also the goalie situation. Chris Truel, Victoria said it, MJ said it in the rebound, giving up some pretty big rebounds, for lack of a better term. What did you see from Truel this weekend?
Well, Victoria said it's so important to have a starting goaltender, and we saw that last year in Michael Gartig, just being a solid, consistent goalie that you know you're going to have in net game in and game out. He led the country in minutes, and we just saw how successful they were last year with him leading the country. But I think this win against Harvard really makes Truel the starting goalie. He had a pretty good weekend, and what he's done on the penalty kill has been excellent. Quinnipiac has the 2nd best power play in the ECAC behind Princeton, and they also have 150 less minutes, or 150 more minutes on penalty ice minutes, on the penalty kill. So I think Truel's play on the PK has gotten him that starting spot. He's not going to be excellent against anyone. He hasn't shut anyone out this year, but I think he's going to consistently keep Quinnipiac in these games.
And I think before we go over to the polls, I think that that's a good point, keeping Quinnipiac consistently in games. That's something that Michael Gartig did his sophomore season, coming in for Eric Hartzell. Quinnipiac fans can't expect a Michael Gartig from last year in Chris Truel, but what they can expect is someone who can keep Quinnipiac in these games.
Absolutely.
So heading on over now to the men's ice hockey polls, there you see it. Denver coming in at #1, Frozen 14 from last year, followed by Minnesota Duluth, Boston College, Quinnipiac coming in at #4, Boston University at 5. We'll get to that in a second, Kyle. UMass Lowell at 6, Minnesota at 7, North Dakota at 8, Notre Dame at 9, and rounding out the top 10 is Penn State. All right, Kyle, I know you have some feelings on Boston.
Have some strong feelings.
Boston University being at #5. Let's hear it.
How is that possible? I mean, do we not forget just a few weeks ago when they beat Quinnipiac 3-0? I mean, yeah, it was a big weekend for Quinnipiac beating Harvard and Dartmouth, but BU is just on another level. I don't see them being below Quinnipiac in any way possible. I don't get that at all.
So, I mean, we could talk about the USCHO polls as much as we want, but it's really the pairwise that means the most. Do you think, I just want to hear your honest opinion, when players wake up or whatever on Monday afternoon when the polls come out, do you really think it affects them?
I don't think so. I mean, Rand keeps his program not worrying about the media at all. If anything, they just use it to motivate them. But I don't really think they pay attention to the polls that much. In fact, St. Lawrence, who is ranked 20th in the USCHO poll and is the 4th highest team in the ECAC, I really think is way too low on the list. In fact, Rand called them last night on USCHO Live. He called them the best team in the league. That might be a little motivation when they play them in Ireland in just a week, especially since they just lost them 2-0. But I find it interesting that with the 4 ECAC teams on the list being Quinnipiac at 4, Harvard at 11, Union at 17, and St. Lawrence at 20, I mean, those aren't my top 4 in that order. I don't really think that they're right. I mean, we know how I feel about the BU ranking, but I think the pairwise definitely plays a lot more role into the playoffs game.
It is the most important poll that comes out. Kyle, now we're going to toss it over to Victoria Rutigliano, who went to Men's Ice Hockey Media Day and spoke with players. Victoria.
Thanks, guys. I'm here at Media Day with alternate captain Tim Clifton, who had a goal and 2 assists this past weekend against Harvard and Dartmouth. Tim, obviously a successful weekend for you guys, beating Dartmouth and Harvard in ECAC games. What was some success you saw from your team this weekend?
I think the power play, really finally, produced some goals, which was huge. Especially because we're getting so many more of them, this year compared to last year. It's important that we, that we capitalize on some of these chances.
Okay, and then on the opposite end, I know Rand Pecknold said in the press conference against Dartmouth it wasn't one of your better wins, but in the end it was still a win. So what are some things this week you guys need to work on before going on to play Cornell and Colgate?
I think we need to start possessing the puck in the offensive zone a little more. I think our zone time has not been very good. And I think that's one of the things, that we're going to work on this week in practice, to get us ready for it.
Okay, and then a lot of new players you're seeing on the special teams like Brogan Rafferty, Carlos Chuksta, and then players like Luke Chiplow, seeing more time as well. So what has those new players and new roles done to help your team succeed on the special teams?
I don't really know. I think each player brings their own kind of little ingredient to the power play, and I think it took a while for us to get going, get some momentum. But now you're starting to see these players produce and have success in these new roles.
All right, thanks a lot, Victoria. Kyle, really quick, let's preview the upcoming weekend, Cornell and Colgate.
Let's do it. So Quinnipiac travels up to Cornell this Friday and Colgate this Saturday. And last year, Quinnipiac was 3-1-1 on the season and in the playoffs against Cornell. But they have had some close games with Cornell in the past. The last 2 years, each game has only been decided by 1 goal. They had a 5-4 win last year at Cornell, and then the year before that, they had a 1-0 overtime win at Cornell. So it's a tough place to play at. I think Cornell still has a bad taste in their mouth from last year when they lost in a 3-game set to Quinnipiac in the ECAC quarterfinals. So I do see Cornell coming out in this game and getting the win against Quinnipiac.
Okay. Colgate also with their new rank, losing the Spink brothers this year, a lot of offense. That's going to be a very interesting game as well.
Yeah, it should be exciting, Andrew. They have a few young players. Their top 3 scorers are either freshmen or sophomores. They have Adam Dowda, who has 8 points, Bobby McMahon, who has 7 points, and John Snodgrass, who has 6 points. Their offense wasn't that good last year, where they only scored 5 goals in 2 games against Quinnipiac, and they also had 11 penalties. I think both penalties are going to increase in this weekend's game because of the fact that the NCAA is reclaiming the rule book. So I do see Quinnipiac's power play becoming a major asset in this game, and I do see them beating the Colgate Raiders in the Saturday game.
Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being here, Andrew.
You all can follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle_Lavasser. That is all the time we have for this edition of the Neutral Zone. Thank you all for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at Q30 Sports, and you can also visit our website, www.q30television.com, for all of our men's ice hockey and, a matter for that, all Quinnipiac sports information. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.